At Dreamforce 2021, Salesforce announced several new features for Slack. Joining me to talk about these new features and the company's vision for Slack becoming the primary way that people engage with Salesforce's products and platforms are Rob Seaman, Salesforce's SVP of Product Management for Slack, and Noah Weiss, SVP of Product at Slack. Rob and Noah, thanks for joining me. So Noah, I'll start with you. Back when the Salesforce completed the Slack acquisition earlier this year, a lot was said about this concept of the digital HQ. So can you give me a rundown on that concept of the digital HQ, and what role that plays, and kind of how work has changed with the COVID pandemic and increased rise in remote work and digital transformation acceleration, and so why that combination of Slack and Salesforce is so relevant for today's businesses?
Yeah, Bill, that could be a half-hour answer, but I'll try to do it in 2 or 3 minutes. So I think the short version of the story is rewind to over a year and a half ago now, last February, when seemingly overnight, the whole world obviously was thrown into this pandemic, and we had to make this shift where we close all our physical offices. We all had to go home. We opened up our laptops, and there we were. That was our new office, wherever we were working from anywhere. And what we've seen over the last year and a half is that there's been this massive shift from working from a physical office, whether it's on Main Street, Wall Street, we were on Howard Street, Rob was on Mission Street with Salesforce headquarters, to now working from our digital HQ that we have in the software that we're working every day. And what we saw from all of our Slack customers was they were incredibly thankful that they could turn to Slack as the offices were shutting down to actually be the place where they see their colleagues, they communicate, they collaborate, they start and end every workday. And so what we're really seeing in terms of behavioral shift is that above all else, there's a expectation of flexibility that didn't used to exist. People want to work whenever and wherever they want, and we see that in all of our survey data. And the gap, though, really is around connection. How do you still feel connected to your colleagues when you're not physically in the same place? So what we've been working on at Slack is a number of innovations, some of which we'll tell you about today, to help people actually feel like you have a digital headquarters where your company can be connected, you can feel engaged with your team, you can drive productivity while not ever having to go into a physical office. So the office, we think, of course, in the future will be an important tool, but one of many. And we hope that Slack combined with Salesforce is going to be this critical digital HQ that companies, no matter where their teams are working from, can get work done in a pleasant, more simple way. I think, Rob, too, it'd be great to hear from the Salesforce perspective as you think about it from the clouds, like how are you seeing what digital HQ means as you bring the clouds and Slack together?
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing to me is we're having these conversations with customers, we're all going through this together, is to not one-to-one translate what we did in the physical world to this digital world, right? And really use this as an opportunity to transform what you do and how you do things in your new digital HQ, right? And Slack's going to help with that. But it also goes beyond the four walls of your company out to your customers, your partners, your suppliers, and your vendors. And that's where we think the combination of Slack with Salesforce can be really game-changing, frankly. So all of that communication that had previously happened synchronously in person or in video-based meetings or through point-to-point communication and email can now happen through Slack, which can be your digital HQ, but you're also going to be empowered by having the products and workflows and applications that support you in your job, whether that be what you use to sell, like a sales cloud, or what you use to market to your customers, like a marketing cloud. That's going to be in Slack with you, where you're living, breathing, and doing your daily work. So that's where we think the two companies come together, really have a promise of helping every company achieve this digital HQ.
I think that's really interesting. I think you gave a really thorough sort of explanation of that. But are there specific ways, you kind of mentioned email and you mentioned some of those connection points. Are there specific ways that people are going to be able to interact with the rest of Salesforce's ecosystem through Slack, right? So Slack is that interface that allows people to not just connect, as you were talking to, Noah, in ways that are unique to a digital world, but connect to Salesforce, the systems and the interfaces that they already use through Slack. Maybe Rob, you could expand on that before we get to the product stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll talk at a high level how we're thinking about bringing Salesforce to Slack, but then also how our customers can take Salesforce to their customers and their partners and suppliers through Slack, if you will. So if you look across the enterprise applications that are out there today, and there are many, there are over 1,000 at every customer we talk to, they're all vying for your attention. They're vying for your attention in the form of, a notification that may come through email or an in-app notification. And every single one of those apps has a different experience. And as we're in this digital world going from meeting to meeting and conversation to conversation, you're constantly toggling between tabs and applications. And the context switching is exhausting. I know I'm exhausted at the end of every day.
I'm exhausted just like both of you. I understand completely.
And it's a tax associated with going between these different systems. And so we think Slack can be the engagement layer for all of those systems where, whether it's a human event, like somebody saying, hey, I need to take some time off next week, or please look at this presentation I just built, or it's a system event like Salesforce telling you need to approve this quote, or DocuSign saying you need to sign this thing. All of those can come into Slack. And that's what Slack's phenomenal at, is providing a consistent experience for these lightweight, event-based, notification-based things from humans and systems that require your attention. And so what we're doing in Salesforce is decomposing all of our products into those constituent events, notifications, micro workflows that need humans' attention, and bringing that to Slack. And to use Slack Connect, which I don't know if you're personally familiar with, but Slack Connect allows you to go outside the four walls of your company. We can not only do it for the employees, but the employees can then take it to their customers, right? And in doing so, or take it out to a partner, like in a marketing context, you can't create a campaign without an agency, unless you're, one of the biggest companies in the world. But you can now do that through Slack Connect with, Salesforce powering how you actually execute the campaign, all directly within Slack.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about those new innovations that are going to enable all that, enable Slack to become that engagement layer. I love that term. So Noah, walk me through the new announcements that you're making around Slack during Dreamforce this year.
Yeah, we'll do. So there's kind of three large categories. The first is around how you can communicate. The second is how you can work with partners. And the third is around the public sector. So I'll go through them again, try to do it pretty quickly. The one that I think is probably the headline, if you're a Slack user, it's going to really change how you experience Slack every single day, is what we're going to start doing is rolling out what we call clips. And the idea behind clips is that you can now in Slack natively record and upload short video and audio clips, optionally with a screen share. Your team can watch it whenever they want. So whatever works for their schedule. So remember, flexibility here is like the most paramount thing people care about. And it's all designed for accessibility and inclusivity from the beginning. So there's live caption support. So whether you can listen to it or you need a aid, you can see all the text alongside. And it's also got a transcript so that people can find in the future, you can search for it. If you're a new hire getting up to speed, you can see this treasure trove of knowledge that's been accumulating now asynchronously. And I think what's, to me, most exciting about this is when you actually look at how people work, we see this in our survey data, about 45% of people working together in Slack are doing so in different time zones. They might be doing so in different continents. And yet the way that to kind of what Rob was saying earlier, the way that we started working in this remote world is we lifted the old way of working. We just said, all right, now let's do it digitally. We used to meet in meeting rooms. Now we meet on Zoom rooms or Google Meet rooms. That's a start, but hopefully it's not the end. And what we want to build is new ways of accomplishing the same goals, right? How do you increase transparency? How do you move faster? How do you make quicker decisions? But how do we build new tools to enable teams to work in new ways that enable asynchronous communication, that have more flexibility, that are designed for inclusivity? So Clips, I think, is going to be one of the most exciting new ways that really adds texture and richness to how you can express yourself in Slack. And it follows what we announced back in July, which was Huddles, which is all about lightweight, fast audio discussions. In fact, Rob and I literally were on a huddle right before this, because we're like, hey, are you good with us just kind of riffing off each other? Yeah, okay, great. All right, let's pregame this really quick. It wasn't a meeting. It would have taken way too long to be in text. And then we're ready to come in here and kind of riff off each other. So we're seeing that. That's the fastest adopted feature in the history of Slack. And we're hoping that Clips also meets customers where they are right now, which is figuring out how to make their teams feel connected when they can't physically be in the same place.
Oh yeah, I'd just love to layer in a few anecdotes from Salesforce. You know, we're obviously one company now, but we're also one of the biggest users of Slack. And specifically with clips and huddles, you know, we're seeing 50% of our employees on a weekly basis are actually using huddles today. So that, you know, our adoption tracks what Noah was just saying about the feature adoption writ large. The other thing I'd say about clips, just to kind of ground it in some of the things that I was saying earlier, there's a one, it's asynchronous. Two, there's a human element to it because it's your voice and it's video. We use it for product design crits or providing feedback on product ideas. You know, you don't have time to sit down and write a long form document, but I can sit down and record a 2-minute video that says, hey, did you think about this? Or did you consider this potential alternative? And it's me, it's not words in a document, you know, and people can hear how I'm feeling and expressing myself as I'm doing it. We also use it to celebrate wins. So, you know, as Salesforce is pushing win notifications into Slack, you know, win stories are a very valuable asset for the sales team moving forward that's going to encounter that competitor next. You know, sales reps can very easily record a clip, you know, that's not only thanks the team and celebrates the success, but talks about what they did to win that particular deal.
You know, I think those are both really interesting examples. And I personally love the example of being able to have a quick kind of asynchronous communication medium, because I prefer that to sitting down. I'm a writer, I'm a journalist, but I prefer that method as opposed to sitting down and writing something out for exactly the reason you kind of said, Rob, which is the person receiving that message gets the inflection in your voice. They get the facial expressions. They get more context around the message you're delivering to help them interpret it the way you want to be interpreted. And like you said, it's just faster sometimes to do that than it is to sit down and write an email that's 500 words. So I love those. I love those examples. So no, I know that one of the next things that you have, I guess, is Slack Connect. These sponsored connections. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I'll do this quickly so we can also cover all the great Salesforce integration news. But Slack Connect, obviously, it's been a huge shift in how people use Slack, from going from internal communication to working with every partner, customer, and vendor. You can bring them into Connect. And I think it's really all about reducing the distance you feel between your own company and the customers that you're working with. And what I think that does in Connect is that with that shared channel, that space that you have, a digital space, you can feel a greater sense of trust because you're working with your customer, your partner, as if they were at your own company. There isn't the barrier of, let's hop on a plane once a year or once a quarter to go see each other, which people are not going to do anyway in the future, probably to the same degree. And so what Sponsored Connections is all about, we've heard this from all our enterprise customers. They say, I want to use Slack Connect for all of my customer relationships. Snowflake is one of our favorite examples of this. They want to service all of their tier 1 customers in Slack Connect. They can give better, more responsive service. Now they're saying, well, I don't want to have to worry about whether the other side even uses Slack, let alone pays for Slack, which used to be a requirement. So Sponsored Connections allows our enterprise grade customers to use Slack Connect with every partner, every customer that they work with, regardless of that other side even pays for Slack at all. And we're also building some usability enhancements as well so that every Slack customer can have a better kind of visibility and view of all the customer relationships that they have through Connect in the product. So the combination of those two, I think, is going to be pretty exciting. And the last thing, just to cover quickly, and then I think we should cover more of the Salesforce news as well, we're going to be announcing what we're calling Gov Slack. And the really simple explanation of that is there is a whole level of FedRAMP compliance that the core part of the federal government actually requires to be able to use a cloud service that Slack previously had a more moderate level of certification with. We're getting FedRAMP high. We're going to be hosted in a special AWS region. There's only going to be US citizens who are actually operating this service. And that's going to open up what we believe is a huge public sector opportunity. We've already seen a lot of traction in the public sector. Now we can go into the more regulated and compliant, sensitive parts of it, in addition to obviously the contractors who work with the federal government but have to have the same level of kind of data control and compliance needs. So that's the one maybe last cherry on top in terms of a new market that we're excited for. And Salesforce is very strong in already. So we're playing catch up there.
Yeah, no, I know that I've worked at a variety of organizations that treat and have treated Slack and other platforms similar to that differently. Some treat it, as you were both kind of talking about, as a knowledge repository, something more than just instant messaging, and others have, data privacy and data archival policies that require Slack messages to be deleted within, say, 30 days or 90 days and things like that. So having that extra layer, I think, really makes sense for those government agencies. So Rob, let's wrap up, and I'll Noah, if you want to chime in here too, in the time that we have, talking about how Slack is really being integrated across Salesforce Cloud industries and industry solution. And how people are going to be, we talked about this a little bit earlier, how they're going to be able to use Slack to really as that engagement layer. What are the Salesforce announcements around Slack coming out of Dreamforce 2?
Absolutely. I'd love to take a moment, candidly, to fanboy on Slack Connect for a second, because it is germane to what we're going to talk about in our innovations. I do think it's one of the more profound innovations that's happened in the secure communication space in quite some time. And it's particularly germane in an enterprise context for the lines of business that we serve, like sales, service, marketing, et cetera. If you look at how things happened in the past, it was through point-to-point emails. And, people change jobs. At the end of the year, territories are realigned and you get new owners of accounts. There are new managers in marketing that are leaders of campaigns. And those communications that previously happened with customers over email or agencies over email were only available to the people that sent them and received them. And by moving that to Slack Connect, you're able to establish a more longitudinal record and space, for your relationship with that company, whether they're a customer, a partner, or a supplier. And we plan to actively use Slack Connect through all the products I'm going to talk to you about today. So earlier I mentioned that we're bringing the customer 360 to Slack. So every single product team has been working on this for quite some time. The beauty of the two companies being built on the fundamentals of open APIs is that even before we closed the acquisition, we were able to start working on the integration of these two platforms and these products. So we're bringing the products that the sales clouds, the service clouds, the marketing clouds, et cetera, of the world over into Slack, but we're also bringing our industry solutions. A lot of people don't realize that industries is one of the fastest growing areas of Salesforce. It's actually grown 58% year over year. So it's not just Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Marketing Cloud. It's our industry solutions for financial services, for healthcare, et cetera. And I'd pick a few. There's a lot in the press release that you're going to see. I'll pick a few to go through, and I'll start kind of at the functional LOB level, and then I'll talk about some of the underpinning technology that we had to build to get there. I'll start with commerce. So from a commerce perspective, when we announced the acquisition of Slack, one of the things we were most excited about was to be able to stand up and say, Cyber Week runs on Slack. So if you think of SREs, merchandisers, marketers, everybody that's needed to actually make Cyber Week happen, they can come together in Slack. And one of the things that's most important in a commerce scenario for end customer satisfaction is getting what you ordered when you were told you were going to order it at the price you were going to order it. Unfortunately, and especially in the last 2 years, that hasn't happened as frequently as it should. And you're seeing companies, retailers move, these physical stores to be more like distribution centers. And so, their back-end fulfillment processes are changing. And again, it directly ties to customer experience. And so what we're doing with commerce is we're taking all of that order exception management and processing and bringing those issues to people's attention in Slack where they are so they can adjudicate them directly in Slack. I'll also talk about banking. We launched corporate and investment banking, a product for that in June, I think in June.
Yeah, I was going to say I had a great conversation earlier this year, with Jujar Singh about that and about some of those announcements. So, please go ahead. I mean, it was really exciting to talk to him about all the growth that they're seeing on industries.
I mean, if you look at investment banking, like it's a young, highly paid, highly mobile workforce. And these are big deals. They can be IPOs, they can be acquisitions. we ran the entire acquisition of Slack through Slack. And so you're able to create these M&A or IPO deal rooms. And that's what we're building with Slack First Banking, is giving in a highly compliant environment. In that particular industry, a manager may not even get to know what their employee is working on. So there's very much a need to know a constraint within that industry. But these bankers can basically work an entire deal through Slack, from initiation to ongoing, adjudication of that particular deal, to the research with third-party analytic vendors. So that's going to happen directly in Slack. And then I think the last functional one I'd hit is education. So as everybody moves to these hybrid or digital campuses, and you have myriad students with varying socioeconomic backgrounds, their primary interface in the past has been the professor or the teacher, but there's also a large support staff, but they typically had to go to a building to access them. So if you're in this hybrid or digital world, they can no longer go to that building. So, let's say they test positive for COVID-19 and have to quarantine. How do they get, and they don't have the AV equipment they need to actually get their classes done and their work done? Is that their teacher's responsibility? Probably not. But what we're doing with Slack First Education is bringing workflows into Slack that allow students to connect to the resources they need to get them help in their educational path directly within Slack. And then lastly, to make all of that happen, we had to do a lot of work from a platform perspective. And we're super excited about what our customers can do. The most prolific developers on top of the Salesforce platform are actually our ISVs and our customers. And so we've taken care of a lot of the plumbing, so authentication, UI generation, things like that. So our customers and our ISVs can integrate on top of the Salesforce and Slack platforms together to build Salesforce-based Slack apps for their users.
That's all really, really interesting. I mean, as a father who just sent their first child off to college, I can certainly empathize with people who find themselves in that situation. Well, Rob and Noah, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate you spending the time with us. Noah, just, one more thing, and Rob, one more thing before we go. Is there anything that you're maybe most excited about, Noah, and I'll go to you first, for Slack and Salesforce in the future? So as we look, I'm asking you, to put your crystal ball, your hat on a little bit here. What can we expect from Slack and Salesforce down the road?
I'm going to give maybe a combo move. So maybe I'm cheating to the one thing, but I'm kind of imagining a world, let's say 12 to 18 months from now, so not too far in the future, where Slack Connect becomes the default way that you work with your customers that you already work with in the Salesforce Customer 360 through the Service Cloud, Marketing Cloud, Sales Cloud, obviously, as well, that it becomes the default interface you use for working with those customers and integrating those platforms. That you now have a whole suite of tools that allow you to feel like you're in the same space as your customers, as your partners, without ever actually having to hop on a plane. Clips, huddles, and a lot more that we can't talk about yet coming down the pike. And then finally, that we have this amazing, hopefully, platform as well that's extensible for our customers to build on top of both the Slack platform and obviously all the amazing tooling that Salesforce has through MuleSoft and other platform tools, so that you can build integrations that flow through those shared spaces to help actually automate a lot of the workflows, to have the event-driven kind of approach that Rob was talking about earlier work between companies as well. I think that's a powerful potential world to get to. That's only possible because Slack and Salesforce have joined forces, as we've announced, and will continue to in the future.
Rob, what about you?
I mean, I hope at Salesforce we can lead the way in this transformation to the digital HQ by bringing our software to it, and others will follow. And by doing that, I ultimately hope that I can keep working from my 7-year-old's bedroom. I hope that we will be able to say that we've fundamentally changed healthcare, that we've fundamentally changed financial services, or that we've fundamentally changed retail because of this digital HQ and bringing the software to where people are working.
Well, thank you both. I really appreciate it. It's been great getting to talk with you.
Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you, Bill.